And welcome back to Therapy Deconstructed. I'm so happy you've joined us. And I have a very special guest today. And it's someone I don't know. We've met, via the internet and talking about potentially speaking on this podcast about a very important topic. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming Nicole Christina. She is a psychotherapist and has been for 32 years, probably started when she was like 2 or 3. Her
You're very
specialist,
kind.
her specialty is something I really, really am excited to talk about. Her specialty is body image at midlife. And we've done a little bit of prep talk. In fact, we've, in all full disclosure, had a beginnings of an interview that went wildly wrong with tech a little while ago. So this is take two. But that only proved to me that Nicole had a lot to say about this topic. And it's something I think with body image, we often think of young women. We often think of young people struggling with this. And so it's such an interesting topic to talk about for thinking about midlife. So we'll get to that. Nicole is also a host of her own podcast, which she just told me has won 5 awards. Congratulations. Her podcast is called Zestful Aging, and she's had it for 6 years, which is quite the undertaking. I am just a little over a year, so I know that's a lot of work. So congratulations on that. She's also a published author. This is quite the guest I have today, ladies and gentlemen. She's written and published a book called On Podcast Interviewing. Is it called podcast interviewing?
It's called Not Just Chatting.
Not
How to
just
become
chatting.
a master podcast interviewer.
That's right. That's right. So really interesting stuff. You've got your fingers in a few different pots, but I really, really want to talk about body image with you and just glean some information for our listeners from your expertise of working with this challenge for people. So maybe we could start with just telling me about kind of how you got into this.
That's a great question to start with. So I went to a very, I'm a clinical social worker, and what some people may not realize, because therapists to the general population are kind of maybe lumped into the same. With clinical social work, we're really into like context and what are the societal pressures. And I went to a program that was very much looking at particularly gender stuff, identity, and very much into what's culture telling us, what's society telling us about what it means to be a successful woman, a valuable woman. And when I started practicing, I noticed that there were a lot of women talking about, young women and older women talking about issues with their body. And I developed a practice really solely based on treating eating disorders. And I lived then in a university town at Syracuse University, and there was no shortage of people. Even if they came in saying, "Oh, I feel depressed or anxious," I learned to say, "What's going on with eating?" And then I learned even more when they said, "Oh, I eat healthy." I used to say, "Oh, great," and then carry on with the assessment. Then I wised up and said, "What does that mean?" And sometimes they would say, "I don't eat fat, I don't eat carbs, I don't," so I really learned to go deeper into what does it mean to eat healthy. And I just learned, and I was really touched by how deeply affected these talented women were by, eating disorder thoughts, body dysmorphia, just really worrying about what they ate. And I remember distinctly, and this is probably, oh my goodness, 3 decades ago, I had a woman who was a grad student and was she was an acclaimed poet. And she would talk to me about how she had to have a box of cereal by her to be able to work and create. And then she looked at me and she said, and I'll never forget this, she said, "People don't realize I binge to survive." And I just kind of got chills like, wow, this has really taken a hold of her her brain and her whole being. And I just found it so profound and striking how limiting these thoughts were, how damaging, and what a prison it was to be caught up in thoughts of body loathing and anxiety around food. And so as time went on, I noticed that even as my clients were aging, they were still talking about it. And then I noticed that around midlife, around menopause, it really reared its ugly head again, or sometimes for the first time, because as you can attest, we've got so many adjustments, losses, renegotiations, new identities, and it leaves a vacuum. And that vacuum is fertile ground to be fed by, no pun intended, but like, I'm just going to do keto. I'm going to do no carbs. I'm going to do clean food, whatever that is. I'm going to do this kind of workout, and it fills a void, and it's very self-reinforcing because people will say, like, you look great. What are you doing? And who does not want to hear that? Who does not want to hear at this age, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You look great. We don't often get that kind of direct feedback anymore. We don't get report cards. We don't get that kind of instant feedback that we're being successful. So, one of my favorite words is it's overdetermined. There's so many reasons why issues with body and food can creep in, because it really truly is a vacuum, and we are living in an Instagram culture.
Okay. Wow. We have to. Wow. 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 Okay.
I hope you were looking for a short answer, because I had to stop myself. There's a lot more, so I'm going to stop there.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of
I saw you taking notes.
questions in between that. I'm
Okay.
just 1 second. I'm going to stop and close my window. I forgot to close.
Okay.
There's going to be an ambulance that's going to come by any second and it'll ruin everything. So got that
Okay.
window closed. Okay, great. Back to it. Okay. So this is fantastic because I don't think you said this in our first recording. So I love this. I think this is kind of, we're going a bit deeper because we've already kind of started. And so we're coming back into it in a deeper level. So it's fascinating to me. I love this stuff. So we talk about the void, right? Now I can identify with that, and I can think about I'm 61.
Me too.
And okay. Oh, good age. Good age. Thinking about the void. So for those out there listening who are thinking, what's she talking about? What is this void you speak of? I know you're talking a little bit about how we start to lose things and that sort of thing. And I was thinking how we become invisible in society. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different pieces. Let's talk about invisibility. If you are a woman who has gotten a lot of attention for your physical beauty, this is crushing, because all of a sudden, and you use the exact word that I hear over and over and over, how did I get it to be invisible? I have a friend who really is just one of these women you look at and you're like, wow, you got some great genetics there. Just a classic beauty. And she had gotten all of her life a lot of attention about her physicality. And she told me a story about being in the grocery store. She thought finally someone was flirting with her, and she was getting pretty excited about that. And she realized, much to her dismay, that he was actually looking at a woman behind her. So it was just, you don't want to almost say like, oh, I wish I was still getting attention for my looks. It's hard to maybe say that, but that is what I hear from some of the women. So that's one real change. The other is, of course, if you're an empty nester, you're no longer, I joke with my friends that you get a pink slip, right? You often, for mothers, will put their heart and souls into raising their children. And then if you've done a good job, They don't need you to supervise them and help them make decisions all the time. There's some individuation and healthy distance, and many women will just feel gutted by this, even though they say to themselves, well, they're doing well, it's great, they're at college, they're thriving, and then let me just pull the knife out of my heart.
Mm.
So there are those losses. Also, there's a renegotiation. There's a term called gray divorce. And this is this is the most common time for people to realize, like, wow, you're watching the History Channel in your recliner, and I want to go walk the Camino or go in a hot air balloon. We have to renegotiate this contract. We're no longer primarily raising children. So now we have to figure out how to recouple, right? What's that like? And that can be a bit of some rough patches, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If we're taking care of family, parents that are failing or frail, that's a real change in identity, because we're used to being the kids, and now often we're more in a parental role of making decisions or helping our loved ones, our parents, do things that normally they would help us do. So there's just so many shifts and renegotiations of identity. And then we're at the point where we know that there's more life behind us than in front of us. And it gets real. We say, how many years do I have left? Have I lived a good life? And what now do I want to do to ensure that the next 30 or 40 years or whatever we have is a life that I can feel good about and proud about and satisfied. So there's so many moving parts, and so many, like, many women will find that maybe they're more financially secure, maybe they have more time, all great things. So it's a bit of a fine line of recognizing the positives and not caring as much, like, okay, I have gray hair, all right, well, fine, or I have wrinkles, okay, so there's an acceptance, but also at the same time a renegotiation of who am I and who do I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of wide open space. And if you don't have intention, and if you aren't thoughtful, and if you're easily manipulated, as we all can be, you can end up in a very small world of looking at your food and looking at your body and looking at your exercise, because it help us feel safe and contained and some sense of control, especially in the world where, I have a hard time now even just looking at the headlines. I used to look at the headlines and be like, okay, I got enough, I got it. And now I simply, even like NPR or whatever, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go make sourdough, or I'm taking a walk. It's too painful. And so hyper focus on eating, hyper focus on our weight, exercise is a really elegant solution, except it has dire consequences.
Yeah. So I wrote down that the idea that it feels this void that comes about by just normal life losses as we age. And I just loved your examples, because I'm sure there are listeners out there who I have a lot of clients who are of, our age, caring for their elder parents in relationships that have changed, and sort of either attempting this renegotiation or not,
Mm-hmm.
who are reacting to the loss of good looks, as we put it,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
the empty nesting. And I talk a lot with women of this age about your identity and who you are. And I know for a fact, for myself, even as a psychologist and a podcaster, excuse me, that in part, this is so useful for me because it helps fill that void, right? It helps make me feel useful, and it gives me a sense of purpose in the morning. And I think about what you're saying with the intention, thoughtful, and recognizing how you're being manipulated, because that is so easy. How many times have you're going out to something and you get dressed, and you think, look in the mirror and you think, okay, I've got it together good enough. And
Yeah.
then you go out and then there's just a comparison that starts to happen automatically, or that sense of feeling invisible, as we talked about. So as you work with women who are becoming more hyper focused on their body image as a result of these sort of situations and kind of markers in our lives, it's going to happen to all of us. How do you help someone begin to understand that, because I think in psychology, that's the most fascinating thing to me, is our behaviors over here, but man, the reasons, the drivers, the motivations for that behavior can oftentimes be very difficult to access consciously. And
Yeah.
that's why therapy is so helpful, because it helps you kind of bring these out of your awareness
It's
thoughts
the
forward. Yeah.
unconscious conscious,
So
right?
how do you do that? How do you help women begin to understand? Because society is rewarding them, as you said. Oh, you look good. Have you lost
It's
weight?
rewarding
We do it to
and
each other, women,
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right. That's a great question, Bonnie. I do a little paradoxical. Now I'm spilling all my secrets, right? My clients are going to be like, "Oh, that's what you've been doing." But it's a bit paradoxical, and I start with what is it doing for you and how is it helping? To be thinking about your body and your carbs and the donut you shouldn't have eaten. Tell me what it's doing. So I try to get them to see that it serves a purpose, it serves a function. It's not ultimately doing what they want it to do. But I think a big mistake newbies make is like, it's bad. You shouldn't not, it's bad for you not to eat fat. Our brains are mostly fat. You need that for your metabolic health. They already know, they're pretty smart and they know it's not really ideal what they're doing, just living on smoothies or whatever it is, or going to the gym and working out until they're hurting themselves. They know, but I really try to focus on what does it do for you,
Mhm.
and sort of unpack with them, what do you need that
Yeah.
you're not getting. And I mean, if this is successful, they get pretty ticked off because it's a bit radical to not hate your body. I mean, that's become the norm. If you can imagine sitting with a group of women, you're going out to coffee and you're talking about whatever, chit chat. And then a woman says, I'm really just so grateful for what my body's doing for me. Like, I just took this great walk and here I am, I walked 4 miles. It was beautiful. It was spring. The plants are coming up. People would look at you like, oh, to say I'm really grateful for how my body works and how my legs carry me and how my feet, after all these millions of miles, are still ready and eager to walk. That just is not normal behavior. What's more normal is, oh, I was really bad this week. I had a piece of birthday cake, or I've been so bad. I haven't gotten off the couch, or I only worked out once, or whatever. So to come at it saying, wow, like, I'm just so glad that I can still do these long walks or play tennis or whatever, just doesn't quite sound right. And so I try to introduce also this idea of who's benefiting from you hating your body.
Mm.
And that is like a wake-up call. Like, well, what do you mean who's benefiting? Who benefits from reinforcing this shame about your body? And then you sort of see a light go on, like, wait a minute, what does that mean? And we talk about who would be out of business if you said, I don't care if I have crow's feet, um, I have wrinkles, and yeah, I take care of my skin, but I'm not getting injections. I'm not worried that I can't go out because now I have wrinkles. I don't think less of myself. So they start seeing a bigger picture that this isn't only a them problem. This is a manipulation of some of it is marketing. It's like you are not lovable unless you look like you're 22. And to really see that click like, wait a minute, I don't like that. I don't like being told that I can't be valuable because I don't look 22. And so you sort of see a bit of a flip. And a person that I don't know if you're familiar with her. I kind of grew up with her in grad school, but Jean Kilbourne did a documentary called Killing Us Softly. She also wrote a book called Can't Buy Me Love, and her whole thing, she's a psychologist in Boston, but her whole thing is like advertising and how we have bought into a really ageist view and how we've adopted it and look at ourselves and say, you are not worthy, you are not lovable because you are graying, because you have a menopause middle, because you have cellulite, because, who says? And so some of my clients will sort of get their dander up, which is kind of what I like, that hating your body actually serves a purpose, and it's not constructive for
Mm,
us. And so that's what I mean by sort of bringing it out into the world and having them then, when they have thoughts like, oh, I don't look the way I used to, or I don't, I'm wearing this size or whatever, to stop and say, okay, what am I believing then? So
yeah.
I'm in this size. What does that mean to me? And then unpacking that. Is that what you really, is that aligned with your values? So it's a exploration.
Hmm.
And the good thing is, and I think you're probably familiar with this, there is a rising tide of women our age saying, I am so done with dieting because I'm talented, I'm bright, I'm resilient, I've had all these experiences. I am not going to diminish myself by saying I can't have a piece of cheesecake when I'm in Little Italy or whatever. I'm going to have the gelato and I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it. And then I know, sugar isn't something I'm going to eat all the time every day, but it's a delightful luxury and I get to do that.
Yeah. I love that. And I was thinking about last year I went to some conference and not to sell anybody out, but there was a woman there that presented. She was a scientist and she presented on the moisturizer industry. And as a scientist, she had taken apart select of, say, the eye cream or all the different names that they use as far
Mm-hmm.
as these really expensive moisturizing products that are really targeted at women. It's all about the remove the puffiness under the eyes and the crow's feet and hide your age, all that
Renewal
marketing.
and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And she stood up and said, "You are spending your money on everything. They're all the same ingredients. So you could go to CVS and buy yourself a little tube of the cheapest whatever. They're the
Mm-hmm.
same
It's
ingredients. They're just
marketing.
packaging them prettier." But the interesting thing that happened, Nicole, is the room was probably three quarters women, and women started to sort of revolt against her. I find that really interesting. Like people were sort of looking around at each other going, no, that's not true. That's not true. That high moisturizer in my pocketbook, it's absolutely unique and special because it's in this beautiful lavender glass jar that looks pretty on my vanity. I could see women disagreeing with her. And she's a scientist sitting up there telling us she's done the research, and she was getting rejected by a lot of women in the crowd. And I thought, I wonder what that was about. But I wonder now, if you're talking about it, if we aren't tuned into, if they haven't worked with you and we aren't tuned into this manipulation, then when someone tells us we're manipulated and we aren't doing any work around the void, what we've lost, it almost feels like we're being robbed of something that we feel we got to control over. Like, I'm controlling my aging with, I'm buying this really special cream. Don't tell me I'm not doing that right, because that's what I'm doing. That's what I need to do in order to feel like I have some control over this period of my life. And we're getting away from body image, kind of, but I just wanted to, like, do you get argued with sometimes? Do you find that women want to reject what you're trying to tell
what
them?
they'll say, what I get all the time is, but it's not healthy to be overweight. And that's a whole kettle of fish. I mean, there's a lot of research that looks at what are your vital signs. Because there's a lot of research that counters this idea that thin is healthy. It's really about your individual physiology and how fit you are. It's not about how thin you are. You can be thin and pretty unhealthy, as we know. So I get that a lot. People get kind of freaked out, like, no, don't take that away from me. I'm holding on to that as a way to control my world. And I really appreciate that. By the way, nobody wakes up and says, I want to be really caught up in this prison of only thinking about what I weigh. It is a horrible situation to live with, but it sneaks in, I guess. First, you're in charge and you're like, okay, I think I'll skip the carbs today. And then all of a sudden, you don't feel like you can have carbs because you're so wrapped up in it. But yeah, I think there is certainly people. In fact, I'm going to do a presentation in my town, and I already anticipate people saying, "Well, wait a minute, are you saying it's okay to be fat?" I just know this is, and I'll talk about. We need to look at our vital signs, and we need to look at how our body is. Can we focus? Are we doing what we need to do? And if so, those are real markers of health. It's, I have a colleague back in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she once said to me, she was a specialist in eating disorders, and she said, it's really swimming upstream to try to introduce these topics and these truths, because women are so indoctrinated. You always feel like you're kind of swimming upstream. And so what I've started talking about is not body positivity or body love, but let's just start with neutral. Let's see if we can go there and think about being more constructive, because I think it's just too much of a leap, at least right now, for women who are really stuck in this to say, oh, I'm going to go from hating my thighs and hating my stretch marks with all of my being to, oh, actually, I love my body. I mean, that is a long road. And so, I try to talk about it in terms of sort of moving out of that real shame cycle into what if I just felt neutral and I could focus on, what am I going to put in my garden? Who am I going to hang out with? Well, where do I want to travel? All these kinds of things. And surrounding yourself with other women who are looking at deeper sources of value, I think, is so important. Because if you're hanging out with chronic dieters and you can't go get a coffee without having someone order non-fat milk and then talk about, that they have to lose these last 5 pounds, you're just going to stay in that indoctrination unless you want to say, I don't really want to talk about diets.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me if I go to dinner or lunch with not all of my girlfriends, but some of them, where we have these endless conversations. What are you going to eat? Oh, what are you going to eat? Do you think you can?
Oh,
I
I
don't know.
know.
This, like,
Do you want to split
pre-approving.
something? Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And then you
Mm.
go to lunch or dinner with a bunch of men, and there's nobody's comparing what they're going to eat with each other. Nobody's deciding what they're going to eat based on what you're going to eat. It's just, and so I love what you're talking about with this idea of shame and the question, what is it doing for you? And this idea, because that's something I ask my
What's the
clients about.
function of this behavior? That was pounded into me at Smith.
Yeah.
What's the function of this behavior? Bam,
Yeah.
bam, bam.
But it's so, I mean, I don't think a lot of us ask that question of ourselves unless, prompted, because that's a deep well. What's it doing for you? And if I answer that honestly, then I have to start getting into the fact that my marriage isn't what it used to
Yeah.
be, or I have to get into the fact that my children have left the home and I feel I don't have a purpose, or I have to think about my aging parents and the way in which that has changed our dynamic. And those are hard things and they're difficult things, but they are the right things to be talking about. That's what's really going on. And this hyper focus on something that also is then drilled into us from society is just so, as you said, it's such a, you can't win. There's just no winning.
Well, the attacker is you. You
Yeah,
can't get away from the attacker.
that's right. That's right. Calls coming from within the house. Yes.
I love that.
I mean,
I
it's
was
true
talking
though.
to a guest of mine and she does some similar work and I loved what she said. And she said, well, this isn't my idea. I borrowed it. So it's like fourth hand here. But the idea that we're attacking ourselves. So we're both the attacker and the victim. So we're kind of leading this weird split off self where we are the ones beating ourselves mercilessly. And I just find that to be so tragic.
Yeah.
That especially, I guess I'm repeating myself now, but at this age, we have so much to offer and the world needs us. I mean, look at the mess we're in. The world needs our wisdom. And if we are fixated on, I need organic kale and I can't have, whatever, it's, to me, it's just a profound loss for the world, that we are so distracted. And maybe that's the point. I mean, if you really want to get into feminism and all this stuff, maybe that's the point, to
Yeah.
disempower women, disempower older women. But I will tell you, there's a groundswell now of women saying, I am not dyeing my hair anymore. I'm not buying the $150 lavender cream I'm putting on. I mean, I have really nice quality cream, but I get it at CVS, often with a coupon, and it's beautiful. But it's my dermatologist said, oh yeah, it's great quality, but it's, I'm paying $10, not,
Yeah.
whatever. So what I really want to focus on is, what experiences can I have now that are rich and light me up? I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Bonnie, but in next week or so, I'm going to be walking in Spain on part of the Camino with my tennis friends. And I am terrified because there are some really long walks. But I've been training for it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to get to walk in northern Spain with these women who have such integrity and I get to walk and then eat Spanish food, use my crummy broken Spanish and experience this. I mean, to me, that's like over the top of delight. I mean, hopefully my feet will be okay, but that's what I want to be focusing on, not like, well, cheese, has fat in it. Maybe I should have
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
garbanzo beans for, that's just not worthy, in my estimation, of having so much real estate in your brain. I'm not
Yeah.
saying don't eat well. I'm saying, people say, well, what should I eat then? What do you say? Stay away from crap. And if you can, if you're physically able, get out and walk and get outside and enjoy the beauty. I mean, that is what the research says, is to move more. And it doesn't have to be, this thing about boot camp. why in God's name would I want to do something called boot camp? Isn't life hard enough? I don't want anything that sounds like a military workout. What I want to do is walk with my little rescue dogs who are chasing chipmunks who's they'll never catch, which is hysterical, and take pictures of the ferns that are coming up with these beautiful designs and feeling so grateful that at over 60, I'm able to walk several miles and really appreciate where I live, which has a lot of forested trails. I mean, that's to me a better use of my time and more enriching to my spirit than, oh boy, I better not have bread for lunch because I had toast for breakfast.
Yeah. 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 I really think this is something that will resonate with people who are listening around the idea of, yeah, what are you focusing on? What is it
Precious
about?
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Oliver talks about, I mean, really, our lives at this point, we don't know what's going to happen. We are living in a time, we just don't know, but we know it's shorter
Yeah.
than we wish. Ultimately, what do you want to spend that energy and time on?
Yeah. And the headspace that all of this eats up, the way in which it can distract you, manipulate you in a way that you then don't feel capable, the
Crush your
shame.
spirit, just
Yeah. Yeah.
crush your spirit. I mean, it's really heartbreaking. I have these women, I know you have clients too like this, where you just like brokenhearted how stuck in a trap they are. These women. I have a woman I used to work with, they made a documentary about her. That's how successful she is. Can't get away from, I ate this, I'm heavy, I'm overweight, I used to be thinner. I'm like, I cannot believe how caught up we can get. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
this
this
is
is
my mission to
I
bring
love it.
light
I
to
love
this.
it. I was just at a networking event the other night, and there's two other women who I just met, that night, and we're standing in a little circle, getting to know each other. And the one woman said to the other one, "I really like that jacket you have on." It was like a blazer, but it was velvet. It was beautiful. And she said, "Oh, I don't know if
Mm,
it's appropriate for spring, but I love it, blah, blah, blah." And then she did the woman thing. And she pulled it together in the front. And she said,
mhm,
"But yeah, I got to lose a few pounds for it to fit a bit better."
mhm.
There was a compliment that started that conversation. "I like your jacket." And in a
Mhm.
matter of 20 seconds, she turned it to shame. And we do it all the time, all
That's
the time.
such a great example.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just so normalized. I love thrifting and consignment shops. That's another thing that I do, but for fun. But I have a woman who owns this really lovely consignment shop. She has such a great eye, and she goes to Italy and it's really fun. Anyway, I've gotten to know her, and she knows what I do. And she says, "You would not believe the conversations I overhear of
Mm.
women in the dressing room, even with moms and
Oh,
daughters."
yeah.
And she just
Often
says, "I
starts
can't
there.
even
Yeah.
listen." Yeah, I can't even listen to like, "You really need to lose a few pounds if you're gonna wear those jeans," or whatever, and
Yeah.
this is just heartbreaking.
Well, and just perpetuating that then through the generations, my mother did it to me, I'm doing it to my daughter, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Unconsciously.
I could talk to you forever.
I know,
I
we have
really
so
enjoyed
much we
this.
have a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. What would you say to people, like, as far as how to reach you if they're interested in talking with you more or working
Mhm.
with you or hearing about your podcast or anything? How do people find you,
Well,
Nicole?
my podcast is Zestful Aging, and you can find it on any platform. It also runs off public radio in the Syracuse, New York area. Um, but zestfulaging.com is a place to do podcast stuff. If you want to talk to me about clinical stuff, working with me, that's Nicole Christina, and you can contact me directly. You can email me through that portal, and we can have a check and see if I would be a good person for you to work with. But it's just something I'm deeply committed to, and I would recommend if people want, I have some books that, some resources I'd really recommend. I don't know if you know this one, Bonnie, but I would love the book Body Kindness. Do you know this
Mm,
one?
no.
Rebecca Skitchfield, she has her own podcast. There's a lot of podcasts on recovery and also body positivity, as it's sometimes called.
Maybe
Um,
you and I could compile a little list that I could put in the show notes
that would be
for
fine.
people.
Yeah.
That'd be great. That'd be
Yeah, and I've
great.
interviewed most of these people because, we're on the same wavelength. But I've read hundreds of books on this topic. I'm gonna say body kindness might be a great place to start.
Great.
It's the other thing I would do is look up Kristen Neff, Neff. She is the founder of the Self-Compassion movement. You can find her on YouTube. She does beautiful YouTubes about developing self-compassion, which is a big part of this. And she's very humble and talks about where she goes wrong every day. And I recommend that to my clients all the time. She has a beautiful workbook called Self-Compassion Workbook. I would also recommend that.
And what was her first name?
Kristen, Kristin, Neff, Neff. She's got tons of resources. She's really spearheaded this whole approach to thinking about ourselves and healing from some of this shame.
Thank you for that. And like I said, you and I'll make sure that all of
Mhm.
this is in the notes. It's been such a pleasure meeting and
Yeah,
speaking with you. And I'm
you too,
glad the
Bonnie.
take two seemed to have worked.
Yay! We love Take Two.
And thanks everyone for listening. This has been such a joy. I just am so curious and so interested in the work that people do. And Nicole Christina, you embody what you were talking about as far as the idea of really embracing who we are, no matter what age, and really embracing our skills, our talents, and the beauty within. And what you are doing is so useful and so needed. So thank you so much for speaking
Mm,
with me today.
thank
We're
you
going
so much.
to have all of Nicole's information in my notes. And then also, as you guys all know, should you want to reach out to me, I offer a free 30-minute consultation, and that will also be in the show notes. I'm a psychologist that I work one-on-one with people also. So it's just been a pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure, Bonnie.
And good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you.